The first shard of glass from my shattered composure fell when the candlelight caught the edge of the silver spoon. It was my birthday, my 30th, and the air in our parents' dining room was thick with the cloying scent of gardenias and unspoken competition. The spoon was part of an ornate antique set, a family heirloom my mother only brought out for special occasions, which, in our household, were merely stages for my sister. Amelia, to shine Alara, was the stagehand. To Alara, my father boomed, his voice a familiar, well-practiced cordiality as he raised his glass of Pinot Noir. 30 years. My God, where does the time go? May this year bring you everything you wish for. His smile was warm, but his eyes flickered, just for a second, towards Amelia, who was preening under the indirect attention. It was a look I'd spent a lifetime deciphering, a mixture of pride and a silent, desperate plea for her to behave. The wishes felt generic, a script he read from for every birthday, mine and hers. But for her, the words always seemed to carry more weight, as if her wishes were grander, more deserving of fulfillment. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice a little too soft. I forced a smile, feeling the strain at the corners of my lips. My mother, Eleanor, patted my hand from across the table, her touch light and fleeting, like a butterfly unsure where to land. "The roast is perfect, darling," she said, and I knew she wasn't talking to me. She was looking at the perfectly seared beef Wellington in the center of the table, her masterpiece, another prop in the evening's performance. "It's all about the pastry." "Mom," Amelia chimed in, her voice a melodic chime that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. She leaned forward, the sapphire pendant our parents had given her for her last birthday, a piece far more extravagant than any I'd ever received, dangling precariously over her plate. "You have to keep everything ice cold. I learned that from a chef in Paris. It's a little trick, but it makes all the difference." Of course, she had learned it in Paris. Amelia learned everything of importance in exotic locales. My knowledge came from books, from quiet observation, from the humble confines of my own kitchen. Her experiences were grand adventures. Mine were quiet studies. The hierarchy was as clearly defined as the placement of the cutlery. I looked around the table. My husband Ben sat to my right, a solid, comforting presence. He caught my eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible roll of his own, a silent message of solidarity. He knew, he'd always known. He was the oasis in the desert of my family dynamics, the one who saw the real me beneath the second-best label Amelia had spent 3 decades meticulously affixing to my forehead. The conversation swirled around me. A vortex of my mother's charity galas, my father's recent golf tournament, and Amelia's latest triumph, landing a prestigious interior design client for her burgeoning firm, Aesthetic by Amelia. I tried to engage, to talk about the new community art program I was spearheading at the local library, but my words were like pebbles tossed into a roaring river, swallowed instantly by the current of Amelia's narrative. And so I told him, "Chartreuse is the new neutral," Amelia was saying, waving her fork for emphasis. He was skeptical, of course, but when I showed him the mood board, he was simply blown away. My mother gazed at her with rapt attention. "You have such a vision, sweetheart." I pushed a piece of potato around my plate. My vision involved coordinating free painting classes for underprivileged kids. It didn't involve chartreuse. The climax of any family dinner was always dessert. My birthday cake was a magnificent 3-tiered dark chocolate ganache creation, my favorite. 30 candles flickered atop it, their tiny flames dancing like hopeful spirits. As my family sang happy birthday, their voices harmonizing with a practiced ease that belied the underlying tensions, I allowed myself a moment of genuine happiness. The warmth of Ben's hand on my back, the familiar tune, the promise of chocolate. It was enough. It had to be enough, the song ended. I drew a breath to make a wish, a simple, quiet wish for contentment, for my work to mean something, for the constant hum of comparison to finally quieten. But Amelia spoke first. "Make a good one." "Alara," she said, her smile a sharp, glittering thing. "Maybe wish for a little of my luck this year. God knows you could use it." The room didn't go silent. The clock still ticked. The ice in my father's glass still clinked. But for me, the world narrowed to the perfect, cruel curve of my sister's lips. Ben stiffened beside me. Amelia, he said, a low warning in his tone. What? She feigned innocence, her eyes wide. I'm just being supportive. It's a tough market for artists. I'm just saying. A little ambition never hurt anyone. You can't just hide away in that little studio forever, can you? I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. My studio, my sanctuary, the place where I created worlds with my brushes, was my greatest pride. She made it sound like a hovel. I'm happy with my work, Amelia, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. Are you, though? She pressed, leaning forward again. The sapphire pendant swung like a pendulum, counting down to my breaking point. It's just so safe, so small. You've always been so comfortable with being comfortable. You never push. You never strive for more. You're just, Ilara. The condescension was a physical blow. I looked at my parents, waiting for the deflection, for the mild reproach, for anything. My mother busied herself with slicing the cake. My father took a long sip of his wine. Their silence was the final twist of the knife. It was permission. It was agreement. And that's when Amelia delivered the coup de grace. It was meant to be an aside, a whisper to me, but the room was so quiet her words landed with the force of a shout. It's okay, you know, she murmured, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. You'll always be second best. Some people are just born to be the supporting act, and you're so good at it. You'll always be second best. The words didn't just hang in the air. They seeped into the walls, into the very foundation of the house, confirming a truth I had fought against my entire life. They were the echo of every ballet recital where she was the lead and I was a tree. Every school report where her A+ was celebrated while my A was met with a nod. Every boyfriend she'd stolen just for the sport of it before discarding them. Something in me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was a quiet internal severance, like a single thread in a vast tapestry giving way. The lifetime of swallowing my words, of smoothing things over, of being the good understanding one, was over. I didn't blow out the candles. I just looked at her, at the smug certainty in her beautiful, hollow face, the 30 flames reflected in my eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see defeat in their reflection. I saw a different kind of fire, I smiled. It wasn't my usual placating smile. It was a new expression, one that felt foreign and powerful on my lips. Second best, I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the tension like a shard of ice. Everyone stared. Ben looked at me, his expression shifting from anger to curiosity. Amelia's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Ilara, don't be dramatic. It was a joke, was it? I asked, tilting my head. It's funny, Amelia. All this talk about pushing, about striving for more, about being the best. I paused, letting the silence build. It makes me wonder what you're really striving for. Or should I say, who you're striving to be? My mother finally found her voice. Ilara, darling, what are you talking about? It's your birthday. Let's not spoil it. Oh, I'm not spoiling it, Mom, I said, my gaze never leaving Amelia. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes now. Not confusion, but fear. A sharp primal fear. She knew. She knew I knew. For years I had carried her secret. I'd stumbled upon it by accident. A forgotten laptop left open in our old home office one Christmas Eve 2 years ago. I'd seen the emails, the transfers, the meticulously constructed facade. It was a secret so profound, so destructive, that holding it had felt like holding a live grenade. I had kept it out of a twisted sense of loyalty, out of fear of the explosion, out of the hope that maybe one day she would change. But you'll always be second best was the pin being pulled. You see, I continued, my tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. Amelia is right about one thing. I am a good observer. I see things. Like the fact that Aesthetic by Amelia has such a stunning, sophisticated website. The copy is so compelling. It really sounds like it was written by a top-tier marketing firm. Amelia's face was pale. It was. I hired one. Did you? I asked softly. Or did you just hire a very expensive web designer to paste the content from someone else's portfolio? The portfolio of a woman named Isabelle Laurent, perhaps? A brilliant interior designer based in Brussels, whose entire online presence and body of work you've been systematically appropriating? The silence in the room was now absolute, profound. My father's glass was frozen halfway to his mouth. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Amelia looked like a statue. Every ounce of her calculated poise evaporated. That's a lie, she whispered, but the terror in her eyes screamed the truth. Is it? I said, finally blowing out the 30 candles. The smoke curled into the air, a ghost of my extinguished wishes. Because I have every email, every transferred file, every single piece of evidence that shows your entire business, your entire reputation, is a beautifully constructed lie. You haven't been designing those spaces, Amelia. You've been stealing them. You're not first best. You're a fraud. And as the last wisp of smoke disappeared, I saw the crown she had worn so arrogantly, my entire life, shatter into a million invisible pieces. The performance was over. The stagehand had just taken center stage. The smoke from my birthday candles hung in the air, a ghostly accusation. For a long moment, no one moved. The world had not simply stopped. It had fractured, and we were all suspended in the jagged space between the before and the after. Amelia was the first to break. A sound escaped her, a strangled gasp that was nothing like her usual melodic tones. It was the sound of a facade cracking under immense pressure. Her face, once a mask of flawless composure, was a canvas of pure, undiluted panic. The color had drained from it, leaving a waxy pallor that made her expertly applied makeup look like a grotesque mask. "You're lying," she choked out. But the words had no force. They were a reflex, a desperate last-ditch attempt to control a narrative that had just been ripped from her hands. Her eyes, wide and terrified, darted from my face to our parents, searching for an anchor, for disbelief, for anything that could stop the freefall. She found only shock. My father slowly lowered his wine glass. The crystal stem clicked against the mahogany table, a tiny sharp sound in the overwhelming silence. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. What is this? What are you saying?" He wasn't looking at me with anger, not yet. It was confusion, a profound disorientation. The foundation of his pride in Amelia, so carefully laid brick by brick over 30 years, was shaking. My mother, however, reacted differently. Her protective instincts, always razor-sharp where Amelia was concerned, kicked in immediately. "Ilara, that is a vicious, horrible thing to say," she cried, her voice trembling with a mixture of outrage and fear. "How could you, on your birthday of all days, to try and tear your sister down like this out of jealousy?" She spat the last word, her eyes blazing as she looked at me. The betrayer. It was the oldest script in the family playbook. Amelia shines, Ilara feels jealous, Ilara acts out. They were trying to slot this seismic event into a familiar, manageable category. But this was no petty squabble. This was an earthquake. Ben's hand found mine under the table. His grip was firm, anchoring. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His presence was a silent vow. "I am here. I believe you." I kept my gaze locked on Amelia. "It's not jealousy, Mom. It's fact." My voice was calm, eerily so, even to my own ears. The lifetime of swallowed words had created a reservoir of stillness within me, and I was drawing from it now. 2 years ago, Christmas Eve, you left your laptop open in the study. I saw the emails, the ones to and from Isabelle Laurent. At first, I thought she was a client. Then I read them. Amelia flinched as if I'd struck her. She remembered. The carelessness, the moment of exposure. She'd been so confident, so sure of her own invincibility that she'd gotten sloppy. "You went through my private emails?" She shot back, a sliver of her old defiance returning. "It was a classic tactic. Attack the accuser." "That's a violation of my privacy." "A violation of privacy?" I repeated, a humorless smile touching my lips. "Amelia, you've built an entire career on the violation of another woman's intellectual property. You've taken her designs, her concepts, her professional identity, and you've presented them as your own. You've taken credit for her talent. What do you call that?" "I don't know what you're talking about," she insisted, her voice rising an octave. She turned to our parents, her hands pleading. "Mom, Dad, she's insane. She's always been jealous of my success, and now she's fabricated this fantasy to destroy me." My father held up a hand, his expression grim. "Stop, both of you." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Ilara, these are very serious allegations. You understand that? You're accusing your sister of fraud." "I am," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "And I can prove it." Those 4 words, "and I can prove it," changed the atmosphere in the room completely. The last vestiges of Amelia's bravado evaporated. The fight seemed to drain out of her, leaving behind a trembling, hollowed-out shell. She sank back into her chair, her shoulders slumping. It was a posture of defeat I had never seen on her before. It was more telling than any confession. "Oh my God," my mother whispered, her hand still pressed to her chest. She was looking at Amelia now, really looking at her, and the fear in Amelia's eyes was confirming everything I had said. The script was useless. The narrative had collapsed. Why? The word was torn from my father. It wasn't shouted. It was a pained, bewildered exhale. He was looking at Amelia, his golden child, and the confusion on his face was heartbreaking. "Amelia, why would you do such a thing?" Amelia didn't answer. She just stared at the ruins of my birthday cake, the chocolate ganache now looking like a dark, messy wound. I answered for her. The dam had broken, and the truth was a flood I could no longer contain. Because it was easier than doing the work. Because she wanted the success, the admiration, the praise, but she didn't want to put in the years of struggle. Isabelle Laurent is the real deal. She's brilliant, but she's based in Europe, and her online presence was smaller 2 years ago. Amelia saw an opportunity. She contacted her, pretending to be a potential client, asking for extensive portfolios and concept designs for a hypothetical luxury property. Isabelle, trusting and eager for work, sent everything, and Amelia took it. All of it. I paused, letting the sheer audacity of it sink in. She rebranded Isabelle's work as her own. The chartreuse as a neutral line she was so proud of tonight. That was from an interview Isabelle gave to a Belgian design magazine. The mood board that blew away her client? It was Isabelle's mood board for a penthouse in Antwerp. The details made it real. It was no longer a vague accusation. It was a specific, methodical crime. "I have it all," I said, my voice dropping. I saved everything. The original emails from Isabelle, the files Amelia downloaded, the side-by-side comparisons of Isabelle's published work and Amelia's portfolio. I have proof that Aesthetic by Amelia is a ghost, a phantom built on stolen bones. The dining room felt like a tomb. The grandiosity of the space, the expensive art on the walls, the gleaming silver, it all felt like a mockery. Our family's carefully curated image was a lie, and I was the one holding the mirror. You kept this to yourself for 2 years?" my mother asked, her voice thin with disbelief. She was looking at me as if seeing me for the first time. The quiet one, the observer, the one who saw everything and said nothing. Until now. "I was going to confront you, Amelia," I said, turning back to her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I was, but then, I don't know. I guess a part of me hoped you'd stop. That you'd get found out, or have a crisis of conscience or something. I didn't want to be the one to destroy you. I didn't want to be the one to cause this. I gestured around the room. This devastation. I took a deep breath. The anger that had propelled me was receding, leaving behind a vast, aching sadness. But you just kept going. You got bolder, more successful, and you never missed a chance to remind me of my place. Second best. You said it with such conviction. You believed it, but you're not first best, Amelia. You're a thief. That was the final blow. Amelia let out a sob, a raw, ugly sound. She buried her face in her hands, her body shaking. It wasn't a performance. It was the real, unfiltered collapse of a person who had been living a lie for so long, she had almost started to believe it herself. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He walked to the window, his back to us, his shoulders tense. He was a man who dealt in facts, in contracts, in tangible assets. This betrayal, this deception, was a language he didn't speak. My mother rushed to Amelia's side, wrapping her arms around her heaving shoulders. "Shh, baby, it's okay," she murmured, but the words were empty. Nothing was okay. It would never be okay again. Ben squeezed my hand. "We should go," he said softly. I nodded. I felt numb, drained. The adrenaline was gone, and in its place was a hollow exhaustion. I stood up. The birthday girl, leaving her own party. No one tried to stop us. My father didn't turn from the window. My mother was engrossed in comforting her fallen princess. As we reached the doorway, I glanced back. The scene was a perfect, painful tableau. The shattered family, the uneaten cake, the victor and the vanquished. But the roles were reversed. The supporting act had delivered a performance that would eclipse the lead forever. We walked out into the cool night air. The silence between Ben and me was comfortable, heavy with understanding. He opened the car door for me, and I slid inside, the leather seat cool against my skin. He started the engine but didn't put the car in gear immediately. He just looked at me, his eyes full of a complexity I couldn't quite decipher. Pride, concern, sorrow. "Are you all right?" he asked finally. I looked out the window at the grand facade of my childhood home. It looked different now, smaller, frailer. "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "I just started a war." Ben put the car in drive. "No, Alara," he said, his voice firm. "You didn't start it. You just ended it." As we pulled away, I knew he was wrong. This wasn't an ending. Throwing a lit match into a powder keg doesn't end anything. It's just the beginning of the explosion, and the fallout was yet to come. The drive home was a silent 20-minute journey through a city that looked exactly the same, yet felt utterly alien. Streetlights bled into streaks of gold against the dark canvas of the night, and the world continued its oblivious turn. Inside the car, however, the axis of my universe had shifted irrevocably. Ben didn't press me. He kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on my knee, a steady, warm pressure that was the only thing tethering me to reality. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the familiar neighborhoods blur past. The numbness that had set in at the dinner table was beginning to recede, replaced by a slow, creeping tide of shock. What had I done? The question echoed in the hollow space behind my ribs, not with regret, but with a dizzying sense of vertigo. I had pulled the pin on a grenade I'd been holding for 2 years, and the silence in its wake was more terrifying than the explosion. We arrived at our house, a modest, craftsman-style home I had painted a soft sage green. With a garden I tended with a patience I never seemed to muster for my family. It was my sanctuary. Tonight, it felt like a bunker. The moment the front door clicked shut behind us, the dam inside me broke. A sob I didn't know I was holding back ripped from my throat, harsh and ragged. The tears weren't for Amelia, or for my parents. They were for the 30 years of silence, for the little girl who had always been told to be quieter, to be nicer, to not make waves. They were for the sheer, exhausting weight of carrying a secret that was never mine to bear. Ben enveloped me in his arms, his solid frame absorbing my tremors. He didn't shush me or tell me it would be all right. He just held me, his chin resting on the top of my head, letting me fall apart in the safety he provided. When the storm subsided into hiccuping breaths, I pulled away, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Don't you ever apologize," he said, his voice firm but gentle. He led me to the kitchen, sat me down at the wooden table scarred with the evidence of our life together, and poured me a glass of water. "Talk to me, all of it," and so I did. I told him everything I had kept locked away, not just the secret of Amelia's plagiarism, but the lifetime of microaggressions that had led to this moment. The ballet recitals, the stolen boyfriends, the way my acceptance into art school was met with a polite, "That's nice, dear," while Amelia's internship at a flashy marketing firm was celebrated with champagne. I told him about the Christmas Eve discovery, the cold dread that had washed over me as I scrolled through the emails, the months of agonizing over what to do. I felt like an accomplice, I confessed, the words tasting like ash. Every time I saw her preen, every time our parents bragged about her, I felt sick. But I was cowardly. I told myself it wasn't my place. I told myself she would eventually get caught. Ben listened, his expression grave. "You weren't cowardly, Alara. You were trapped. She's your sister. That's a bond that's supposed to mean something." He reached across the table and took my hand. But what she said tonight, second best, that was the line. She didn't just cross it. She obliterated it. "What have I done to our family, Ben?" The question was a plea. "You told the truth," he said simply. "The destruction is on her, not on you. She built her house on sand. You just pointed out the tide was coming in. His certainty was a lifeline. But as the night wore on, the practical implications began to dawn on me. The evidence, I had it all meticulously organized. but it existed in a digital vault I had never intended to open. It was on an encrypted external hard drive tucked away in my studio, a place I associated with creation, not destruction. I didn't sleep. I lay beside Ben, listening to his steady breathing, and stared at the ceiling. My mind raced through scenarios. Would Amelia confess? Would she try to brazen it out? Would my parents, in their desperation to preserve their image, pressure me to recant? The silence from my family was deafening. My phone, lying on the nightstand, remained dark. No frantic calls, no angry texts. The quiet was a battle strategy I recognized all too well. They were regrouping. The next morning, the world outside my window was deceptively bright. The storm had passed, leaving a clean, washed sky. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. I felt raw, exposed, every nerve ending buzzing. Ben had to go to work. He hesitated at the door. "Call me if you need me. I can come home any time." "I'll be okay," I said, and almost believed it. The moment he was gone, the house felt immense and empty. I avoided my studio. I couldn't face the place where my own creativity lived alongside the proof of my sister's deceit. Instead, I made tea and tried to read, but the words swam on the page. Around 10 o'clock, my phone finally lit up. It wasn't Amelia or my father. It was my mother. The message was brief and devoid of any warmth. "We need to talk. Your father and I will be there at noon." Not, "Can we come over?" Not, "How are you?" A statement of fact. A summons. The battle lines were being drawn. The hours until noon stretched into an eternity. I paced the living room, my stomach a tight knot of anxiety. They were coming to my turf, but I knew that didn't give me the advantage. My parents were masters of emotional siege warfare. At precisely 12 o'clock, my father's dark sedan pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as they got out. My mother looked drawn, her usual impeccable style replaced by a simple sweater and slacks, as if she couldn't muster the energy for her armor. My father's face was a granite mask of grim purpose. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. The three of us stood in the doorway for a moment, a frozen tableau of a family broken. "Come in," I said, my voice flat. They stepped inside, their presence immediately making my cozy living room feel small and cramped. My mother's eyes scanned the room, not with appreciation, but with a kind of clinical assessment, as if looking for weaknesses. We didn't sit. We stood in the center of the room, facing each other like negotiators from warring tribes. My father spoke first, cutting to the chase. "We've spoken with Amelia." I waited, saying nothing. "She is devastated," my mother interjected, her voice tight. "What you did last night, Alara. The cruelty of it. To ambush her like that, in front of everyone, on your birthday. She made it sound like a perverse act of self-mutilation." "It wasn't an ambush, Mom. It was a response," I said, keeping my tone even. "She ambushed me with a lifetime of being made to feel inferior. Last night was just the final installment." "Don't be dramatic," my father said, a familiar weariness in his voice. "This situation is a family matter. It needs to be handled within the family. Amelia admits she may have been overzealous in her sourcing of inspiration." I almost laughed. Overzealous in her sourcing of inspiration? It was such a corporate, sanitized way to describe systematic, career-long theft. It's not inspiration, Dad. It's theft. And it's not a situation. It's fraud. "She's your sister," my mother cried, her composure cracking. "Do you want to see her destroyed? Do you want to see her humiliated, her business ruined? Do you have any idea what this would do to her? To this family's reputation?" There it was. The core of it. The reputation. The image. The carefully constructed illusion of perfection. "What about Isabelle Laurent's reputation?" I asked quietly. "What about her work? Her livelihood? Does that not matter?" My mother waved a dismissive hand, as if swatting away a gnat. "We don't know this woman. This is about us. Your father and I. We are asking you, Alara. We are begging you. Delete whatever it is you think you have. Let this go, for the sake of the family." They were both looking at me with a desperate intensity. This was their play, not an apology from Amelia. Not a reckoning, a cover-up, an appeal to my role as the placator, the peacemaker, the one who always smoothed things over. For a moment, I was tempted. The path of least resistance was a well-worn one in my life. It would be so easy to nod, to pretend, to let the silence settle back over everything, to go back to being second best, but with the grim satisfaction of knowing I held the power. But then I saw Amelia's smug face from the night before. I heard her voice. "You'll always be second best." I looked at my parents, at their pleading, fearful faces, and I knew, with a cold, clear certainty, that if I gave in now, I would be confirming her words forever. I would be choosing to remain in the supporting role, this time as the guardian of their lies. I took a deep breath. The air in the room felt different. It was mine. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. My mother's face crumpled. "Alara, please." "I said no," I repeated, my voice stronger now. "I will not delete it. I will not let it go. What Amelia has done is wrong. It's illegal, and it's hurting another person. This isn't about family reputation anymore. It's about basic integrity." My father's jaw tightened. The negotiator had failed. "What are you going to do then?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "That depends on Amelia," I said. "She has 1 week. 1 week to come clean, to contact Isabelle Laurent, confess what she's done and begin the process of making it right, to dismantle Aesthetic by Amelia and issue a public apology. And if she doesn't," my mother whispered, her face pale with horror. I met my father's stony gaze. "Then I will." The silence that followed was heavier than any that had come before. I had not just refused their request. I had issued an ultimatum. The grenade had not just exploded. I had thrown the pin at their feet. Without another word, my father turned and walked out the door. My mother gave me one last, devastated look, then followed him. I stood alone in my living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had just declared war on my own family, and as I watched their car disappear down the street, I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the battle for the truth had only just begun. The quiet was over. The storm was here. The week that followed my ultimatum was a study in psychological warfare. The silence from my parents' house was no longer just quiet. It was a weapon, a pressurized void designed to make me crack. They did not call. They did not text. It was a complete and total cutoff, a tactic I knew was my mother's specialty. She believed that isolation, the withdrawal of familial presence, was the ultimate punishment. For the first 2 days it worked. I jumped every time my phone chimed, only to be disappointed by a newsletter or a message from Ben. The absence of their anger was, perversely, more unnerving than the anger would have been. Ben was my rock. He came home each evening and, without pressing for details, would simply envelop me in the normalcy of our life. He'd talk about his day, ask about the mural I was designing for the library, make us dinner. He created a bubble of sanity in my increasingly surreal world, but even within that bubble, the tension was a palpable third presence. I avoided my studio. The hard drive, a small black rectangle of potential annihilation, felt like it had a gravitational pull of its own. I wasn't ready to face it. Instead, I threw myself into the library project, losing myself in the swirls of color and the hopeful faces of the children I was sketching. My work had always been my refuge, a place where I controlled the narrative. Now it was the only narrative I had left that wasn't tainted by betrayal. On the 3rd day, the siege tactics escalated. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered, against my better judgment. "Alara, it's Jonathan Hayes." The voice was smooth, confident, laced with a professional concern that set my teeth on edge. Jonathan Hayes was the Hayes & Hayes, Sterling and Worth, my family's law firm for 3 generations. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was a family friend, the man who had handled my grandfather's estate. His voice was a relic of Christmases past and summer barbecues. "Jonathan," I said, my throat tight, "this is a surprise." "I wish it were under better circumstances, my dear," he said, his tone avuncular. "Your parents are terribly worried about you. They feel there's been a significant misunderstanding. They've asked me to reach out, to see if we can't all sit down like reasonable adults and find a path forward that doesn't involve, well, irrevocable damage." The threat was velvet-coated, but it was a threat nonetheless. They had sent in the big guns. The message was clear. This was no longer a family squabble. It was a legal matter. "There's no misunderstanding, Jonathan," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "The facts are very clear. I've stated my terms to my parents." He sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. Alara, these terms, as you call them, they are extreme. You're talking about publicly destroying your sister's livelihood, your family's good name. Have you considered the legal ramifications for yourself? Making such allegations, even within the family, can have serious consequences. Defamation is a very real thing. The shift was masterful, from concerned family friend to cold-eyed attorney in the space of a sentence. He was trying to frighten me, to make me doubt the fortress of evidence I held. I'm aware of what defamation is, I replied, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. And I'm confident in the truth of my statements. The evidence I have is not allegation. It's documentation. Evidence obtained through what could be argued as questionable means, he countered smoothly. Invasion of privacy, unauthorized access to a computer system. These are not insignificant matters. Your parents are willing to overlook all of this, Alara. They want to help you. They want to protect you from making a terrible mistake. Protect me. The phrase was like a spark on dry tinder. They weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to protect the carefully constructed illusion of our family. They were trying to protect Amelia. Thank you for your concern, Jonathan, I said, my voice icy. But I don't need protection. I need my sister to take responsibility for her actions. The clock is ticking. The ultimatum stands. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The friendly pretense evaporated completely. I strongly advise you to reconsider, Alara. For your own sake. Once this genie is out of the bottle, there's no putting it back. I understand, I said, and I ended the call. I sat on my sofa, trembling. They had lawyered up. The reality of it hit me like a physical blow. This was real. This was happening. My own family was threatening me with legal action. That evening, I finally went into my studio. The room smelled of turpentine and beeswax, a scent that usually filled me with peace. Now it felt like the lair of a conspirator. I went to the bottom drawer of my large storage cabinet, buried beneath rolls of unused canvas and old sketchbooks. My fingers closed around the cool, hard plastic of the external drive. I plugged it into my computer. The folder appeared on the screen, innocuously labeled Reference Materials. I opened it. Inside were subfolders, meticulously organized, emails, portfolio comparisons, financial transfers, Isabelle Laurent, original work. I clicked on the portfolio comparisons folder. A grid of images filled the screen. On the left, screenshots from Isabelle Laurent's website, dated 2 and 3 years ago. On the right, images from Aesthetic by Amelia's portfolio. They were identical. The same room layouts, the same furniture, the same art on the walls. The only difference was the watermark. Amelia had been lazy, or perhaps so arrogant she didn't think she'd ever be caught. She hadn't even bothered to change the minor details. Scrolling through them, I felt a fresh wave of anger, clean and sharp this time. This wasn't just about hurting me. This was the life's work of a woman an ocean away. A woman who had no idea her creativity was being used as a prop in my sister's fraudulent play. I opened the emails folder. There they were, Amelia's initial inquiries to Isabelle, full of flattery and feigned interest. Isabelle's generous, detailed responses, sending over full concept packages, trusting that she was dealing with a legitimate client. And then, the final emails from Amelia, cutting off communication abruptly after she had received everything she needed. It was all there, a perfect, damning chronology of theft. The sound of the doorbell made me jump, my heart leaping into my throat. It was late. Ben wasn't due home for another hour. A cold dread washed over me. Had they come? My parents? Amelia? I crept to the front window and peered through the blinds. A delivery van was pulling away. On the doorstep was a large, flat cardboard package. I waited until the van was gone, then opened the door and brought it inside. There was no return address. Using a box cutter, I sliced through the tape. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a painting. My painting. It was one of my earliest serious works, a landscape from a summer we spent at a lake house when I was 16. I had given it to my parents for their anniversary. They had hung it in their hallway for years, a token gesture of support for my hobby. Now it was here, delivered to my doorstep like a piece of returned mail. There was no note. None was needed. The message was as clear as if they had shouted it through a megaphone. You are no longer part of this family. You have been erased. I sank to the floor, the painting leaning against the wall opposite me. It was a good painting, I thought distantly, full of the hopeful, unjaded passion of youth. I had captured the light on the water just right. The delivery of the painting was the final, brutal maneuver in the siege. They weren't just silent. They were exiling me. They were returning the artifacts of my membership, revoking my privileges. But as I sat there on the hardwood floor, staring at the younger, more innocent version of myself reflected in the brushstrokes, something shifted inside me. The fear began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Their attempts to intimidate me, to isolate me, to make me feel like an outcast, it was all backfiring. They had returned my painting. They had given me back a piece of myself. I stood up. I walked back into my studio and looked at the evidence on the screen. I wasn't just holding Amelia's secret anymore. I was holding the key to my own liberation. The week wasn't over yet, but I knew with absolute certainty that Amelia would not confess. The fortress of lies was too well fortified. My parents would never allow it. The siege had failed. They had tried to break me with silence, with lawyers, with emotional blackmail. But all they had done was show me the true cost of my silence, and I was no longer willing to pay it. The path ahead was terrifying. But for the first time in my life, it was mine, and mine alone. I was no longer second best. I was the keeper of the truth, and it was time to let it speak. The returned painting leaned against my living room wall like a silent witness. Its presence was no longer a source of pain, but a monument to my resolve. The siege was over. I had not surrendered. The fear that had gripped me for days had crystallized into a cold, clear purpose. They had shown me their hand: lawyers, emotional exile, the unspoken threat of legal retribution. They believed I would fold under the pressure. They had underestimated the quiet one, the observer. The deadline was looming. 3 days. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that Amelia would not confess. Confession required a capacity for humility she simply did not possess. It required an acknowledgement of wrongdoing that would shatter the flawless image she had so carefully constructed. No, she would rather burn everything to the ground than admit the foundation was rotten. I could not let that happen. Not just for my own sake, but for Isabelle Laurence. For days, her name had been an abstraction, the wronged party in my narrative of Amelia's betrayal. But as I looked at the stolen designs on my screen, I saw her, a woman, an artist, a professional, whose passion and talent had been hijacked. She was the ghost in Amelia's machine, and she deserved to know. The thought was terrifying. Contacting her was the point of no return. It was taking a private family war and making it international, irreversible. But the alternative, allowing the theft to continue, allowing Amelia to profit from another woman's genius, was untenable. I spent a full day drafting the email. It had to be perfect. It had to be credible, compassionate, and undeniable. I couldn't just burst into her life with accusations. I had to provide proof from the very first sentence. I found her professional contact address on her website. Her portfolio was breathtaking. Even seeing it for the 10th time, side by side with Amelia's pale imitation, I was struck by the depth of her vision. There was a soulfulness to her work, an intelligence in her use of space and light that Amelia's bland rebranding completely failed to capture. Amelia had stolen the blueprint but missed the spirit entirely. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I took a deep breath and began to type. Subject: Urgent matter concerning your intellectual property. Dear Ms. Laurent, my name is Alara Evans. I am writing to you under circumstances that are both deeply uncomfortable and I believe critically important. I am the sister of Amelia Evans, who operates an interior design firm in the United States called Aesthetic by Amelia. I am contacting you because I have discovered compelling evidence that my sister has, for at least the past 2 years, been systematically presenting your original design concepts and portfolio work as her own. I paused, my heart hammering. This was it. The Rubicon. I understand that this message will likely come as a shock, and you have no reason to trust a stranger making such a serious allegation. Therefore, I have attached a document containing side-by-side comparisons of work from your online portfolio, with dates, and identical images from my sister's website. I have also included copies of email correspondence I believe originated from you, sent to my sister in response to her inquiries, which she then used to access your full design packages. I discovered this information by accident 2 years ago and, out of a misplaced sense of family loyalty, did nothing. I can no longer stand by. What she has done is a profound violation of your talent and your profession. I am prepared to provide you with all the evidence in my possession. I am so terribly sorry for the role my silence has played in allowing this to continue. You have every right to be angry, and I would not blame you if you dismissed this outright. But I felt you had a right to know. Sincerely, Elara Evans. I attached the PDF I had meticulously compiled, a dozen pages of damning visual evidence. I didn't give her a chance to second-guess myself. I hit send. The email vanished into the ether. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed by a strange, lightheaded relief. The truth was no longer mine alone to carry. I had passed the burden to the one person who had the most right to it. The next 24 hours were an agony of anticipation. I barely slept. Every ping from my phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I expected anger. I expected disbelief. I expected a terse legal response from a Belgian lawyer. What I did not expect was the reply that landed in my inbox the following evening. It was measured, thoughtful, and utterly devastating in its clarity. Dear Elara, thank you for your email. To say I am shocked would be a gross understatement. I have spent the last several hours reviewing your document, and I am, quite frankly, horrified. The evidence is irrefutable. I remember the inquiries from Amelia Evans very clearly. She was exceptionally persuasive, expressing great admiration for my work, and discussing a large, hypothetical project that never seemed to materialize. I sent her extensive materials, as I do with any serious potential client. To discover that she was not a client but a ghost is a violation I am struggling to process. Your email must have been incredibly difficult to send. Please do not apologize for your initial silence. Family dynamics are complex, and I cannot imagine the position you were in. What matters is that you have spoken now. For that, I am grateful. The scale of this is overwhelming. She has not just stolen a few ideas. She has built an entire career on my back. I need some time to consult with my legal counsel here in Brussels. But I would like to speak with you directly if you are willing. A video call, perhaps? It would be helpful to understand the full context. With thanks, Isabel. I read the email 3 times. There was no fury, no recrimination aimed at me. There was a graceful, professional shock, and a quiet, steely resolve. She was not a victim wringing her hands. She was a general assessing the battlefield. Her calmness was more powerful than any outburst could have been. We arranged a video call for the next morning. When her face appeared on my screen, I was struck by her presence. She was not what I had pictured. She was in her late 40s, with intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses, and a face that spoke of laughter and concentration. She was sitting in a bright, airy studio, shelves of fabric samples and books visible behind her. A real studio, a real life. Elara, she said, her voice accented, soft but firm. Thank you for doing this. Isabel, I replied, my own voice shaky. I'm so sorry. She waved a hand gently. We can set the apologies aside. We have practical matters to discuss. Tell me everything. And so I did. I told her about Amelia, about our history, about the birthday dinner. I told her about my parents' reaction, the lawyer, the returned painting. I held nothing back. It was a catharsis speaking the whole, ugly truth to this stranger who was, paradoxically, the only person in the world who could fully understand the magnitude of the betrayal. She listened intently, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. This is not just about you and your sister, she said finally. This is about the integrity of our entire field. What she has done, it is an insult to every designer who works honestly for their success. She leaned closer to the camera. Elara, I want to pursue this, legally, professionally, but I cannot do it from Brussels without your help. The evidence you have is crucial. Are you prepared to see this through? The question hung in the air. It was the final commitment. Saying yes meant aligning myself with her, against my own family. It meant standing as a witness in whatever legal proceedings followed. It meant embracing the role of the destroyer. I thought of Amelia's smirk. I thought of my parents' pleading faces. I thought of the painting leaning against my wall, a symbol of my returned identity. Yes, I said, my voice clear and strong. I am. A small, grim smile touched Isabel's lips. Good, then we have a plan. My lawyer will be in touch. We will need to move quickly before she has a chance to cover her tracks further. We spoke for another half hour, mapping out a strategy. It was surreal, planning the downfall of my sister with a woman I had just met, but it also felt right. It felt like justice. After we ended the call, I sat back in my chair. The weight was still there, but it was different now. It was no longer the crushing burden of a secret. It was the shared weight of a purpose. I was no longer alone in the bunker. I had found an ally on the outside. The deadline I had given Amelia expired that night. As predicted, there was no confession, no plea for mercy, only the continued arrogant silence. But the silence no longer frightened me. The following morning, an email arrived from a law firm in Brussels, with my lawyer. A sharp-eyed woman named Ben had insisted I retain, copied on it. The subject line was, "Formal cease and desist and intent to pursue legal action." The war was no longer cold. The first official shot had been fired, and I, Ilara, the artist, the observer, the second best, was now a general in the army of truth. The battle for our futures had begun. The email from the Brussels law firm was a thing of cold, beautiful precision. It was not a shout, it was a scalpel. Addressed to Amelia and carbon copied to her lawyer, Jonathan Hayes, it laid out the case with devastating clarity. It cited specific instances of copyright infringement, attached a handful of the most egregious side-by-side comparisons, and demanded the immediate cessation of all business activities under the name Aesthetic by Amelia, the removal of all plagiarized content from the internet, and the preservation of all relevant documents for discovery. It gave her 72 hours to respond, before Isabelle Laurent would file suit in both Belgian and American courts. I read it 3 times, a strange sense of detachment settling over me. This was no longer a family drama. This was a legal document, a cannonball fired across the bow of my sister's fraudulent ship. The first domino had been tipped. The response was not long in coming, but it did not come from Amelia. Within 2 hours, my own lawyer, a formidable woman named Sarah Jenkins, called. "Ilara, I've heard from Jonathan Hayes," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "He's requesting an emergency meeting. Today. He's suggesting neutral ground, a conference room at his firm." My stomach clenched. What should I do? "Go," Sarah said without hesitation. "But I'll be with you on speakerphone. Do not say a word without me. This is a negotiation, but it's also a trap. They will try to intimidate you, to appeal to your emotions. Your job is to be a stone. Let me handle the legalities. You are there as a witness to your own resolve." Ben insisted on driving me. He waited in the car, a silent sentinel, as I walked into the sleek, intimidating skyscraper that housed Hayes, Sterling, and Worth. The air smelled of money and power. I was escorted to a sterile conference room with a panoramic view of the city. A polished mahogany table gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. It felt like a room where lives were dismantled with polite efficiency. I placed my phone on the table, Sarah Jenkins on speaker. A moment later, the door opened. Jonathan Hayes entered, his face a carefully composed mask of grave concern. Behind him came my parents. My mother would not meet my eyes. My father's gaze was like granite. Amelia was not with them. Of course not. She was letting her shields absorb the first impact. "Ilara," Jonathan began, taking a seat at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming. I have Ms. Jenkins on the line as well, I presume." "I'm here, Jonathan." Sarah's voice crackled from the phone. "Good. Then let's dispense with the pleasantries." He steepled his fingers. "This letter from Belgium is an escalation that serves no one. It is a nuclear option. The damage it will cause, to Amelia, to your parents, to this family's standing, will be irreparable." Sarah responded before I could. "The damage was caused by your client's actions, Jonathan. Not by my client's decision to expose them, or by Ms. Laurent's decision to protect her intellectual property. Let's be very clear about where the responsibility lies." My mother flinched. My father's jaw tightened. "We are not here to debate fault," Jonathan said smoothly, though a muscle twitched in his cheek. "We are here to find a solution, a family solution. Amelia is devastated. She is prepared to make significant concessions, such as?" Sarah asked, her tone bored. "She will shutter Aesthetic by Amelia," my father said, speaking for the first time. His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't slept. Immediately. She will issue a private written apology to this woman, and she will pay a substantial financial settlement to her, the terms of which we can negotiate. Quietly. No public disclosure. No lawsuit. They thought they could buy silence. They thought they could sweep it under a very expensive rug. Sarah Jenkins was silent for a moment, letting their offer hang in the air. "That is a start," she said finally. "But it is insufficient. A private apology and a private settlement do nothing to correct the public record. Ms. Laurent's professional reputation has been harmed in a public forum. It must be restored in a public forum." "You want her to make a public statement?" My mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "Admit to everything? It would destroy her." "Her actions have already set that destruction in motion," Sarah replied, her voice like ice. "Our concern is for Ms. Laurent, and for my client, who has been living with the burden of this deception. A private settlement might satisfy Ms. Laurent financially, but it does nothing to address the psychological harm done to Alara." They had not considered that. They had not considered me at all. "Alara, please," my father said, turning his anguished gaze to me, bypassing Sarah completely. It was a deliberate tactic. "Think about what you're doing. This is your sister. We can end this today. We can keep it in the family. Amelia will be punished. She will lose her business. Isn't that enough? Do you need to see her crucified in the press as well?" I looked at him, at the man who had always preached integrity, and saw only a desperate father trying to save his favorite child from the consequences of her own actions. The last vestige of my hope for their understanding died in that moment. I leaned forward slightly, towards the phone. "Sarah, what are the non-negotiable terms for Ms. Laurent?" Sarah's voice was clear and firm. 1. A public statement, posted on all of Amelia's social media and professional channels, admitting to the plagiarism in full, acknowledging Isabelle Laurent as the original artist, and apologizing unequivocally. 2. A financial settlement to be agreed upon by Ms. Laurent's lawyers. 3. A legally binding agreement that Amelia will not work in the field of interior design or a related creative field for a period of no less than 5 years. The room went dead silent. The terms were brutal, definitive. They were not designed for reconciliation. They were designed for justice. Jonathan Hayes shook his head, a slow, weary motion. "That is impossible. Amelia will never agree to that." "Then she will agree to a very public, very damaging lawsuit," Sarah said. "The evidence is overwhelming. She will lose, and the result will be the same, if not worse, but it will be played out on the front pages of the design blogs and maybe even the mainstream press. This is the cleaner option. It's the only option that gives her a shred of dignity." My mother began to cry, soft, helpless sobs. My father put his arm around her, but his eyes were on me, filled with a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical force. "This is what you want?" he whispered to me, his voice breaking. "To end your sister's life?" I met his gaze, and for the first time I did not look away. I did not shrink. "No, Dad," I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. "I want her to start telling the truth, and I want to start living in a world where it matters." I stood up. The meeting was over. There was nothing left to say. "Jonathan, Ms. Laurent's 72-hour deadline stands," Sarah said through the phone. "You have our terms. The choice is yours." I picked up my phone and walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I walked through the opulent lobby, out into the bright, indifferent daylight. Ben saw me coming and got out of the car. He didn't ask how it went. He just opened his arms and I walked into them, burying my face in his chest. I didn't cry. I was done with tears. "That's it then," I murmured. "They chose her. They'll let her fight it, and she'll lose everything." Ben held me tighter. "They made their choice a long time ago, Alara. You just finally stopped letting it define you." As we drove away, I knew the dominoes were falling. The next one would be louder. It would be public, and there was no going back. The clean, private solution had been rejected. Now the world was about to find out who Amelia Evans really was, and in the process they would finally see me, not as second best, but as the woman who told the truth. The 72-hour deadline came and went without a response. The silence from Jonathan Hayes' office was a louder, more final answer than any legal filing could have been. They had chosen the battlefield, public opinion. They were betting that Amelia's charm, our family's reputation, and the sheer audacity of denying the undeniable could somehow withstand the tsunami of truth. It was a desperate, foolish gamble. Isabelle Laurent's lawyers did not hesitate. The lawsuit was filed simultaneously in a Brussels court and a federal court in New York, citing international copyright infringement and fraudulent misrepresentation. The legal documents were dense and dry, but the press release that accompanied them was not. It was a masterpiece of concise devastation. It hit the design world like a bomb. I first saw it on a prominent interior design blog. I followed. Stunning allegations, rising star, Amelia Evans accused of systemic plagiarism. The article was careful, using words like alleged, but it contained a few of the side-by-side comparisons. The evidence was so blatant, so visually striking, that it needed little commentary. The comments section exploded. From there, it spread like wildfire. Other design websites picked it up, then lifestyle magazines. Then, the mainstream news, lured by the tantalizing elements of sisterly betrayal and high society fraud. Sister versus sister in bitter design theft scandal. Aesthetic by Amelia, a house of cards built on stolen dreams. My phone became a weapon of mass notification. News alerts buzzed incessantly. My social media feeds, once a curated stream of art and friends, were flooded with the story. There were pictures of Amelia from her glamorous website, now looking smug and fraudulent. There were pictures of Isabelle Laurent, looking dignified and resolute. And then there were pictures of me. A journalist had dug up a photo from the library art program's website. It was a candid shot of me laughing with a group of children, a paintbrush in my hand. The caption read, Ilara Evans, the whistleblowing sister and an artist in her own right. I stared at the image. I was no longer just Amelia's sister. I was a person, an artist, the whistleblower. The fallout was immediate and brutal for Amelia. Her Instagram account, a carefully crafted gallery of her work, was inundated with angry comments. Fraud! Thief! Give Isabelle her designs back! Her website was taken down within hours, replaced by a blank error message. Her phone, I later learned, rang off the hook with calls from furious former clients, who now realized the unique designs they had paid a fortune for were stolen goods. Her reputation, the ethereal thing she had valued above all else, was evaporating in the heat of public scorn. My parents' fortress of silence crumbled under the media siege. Reporters camped outside their house. My father's business associates called with awkward questions. My mother's charitable board suddenly found her presence distracting. The pristine reputation they had sacrificed so much to protect was now publicly, indelibly stained. They did not call me. The silence from their end was now a chasm, vast and uncrossable, but the world was reaching out. I received emails from old school friends, from colleagues in the art world, from complete strangers. Most were messages of support. You are so brave. Thank you for standing up for artists everywhere. A few were vicious, accusing me of jealousy, of tearing down my sister for my own gain. I deleted those. The validation from people who understood the sanctity of creative work was a balm I hadn't known I needed. In the eye of the hurricane, I found a strange sense of calm. The secret was out. The truth was doing its own work. I focused on my library mural, losing myself in the physical act of painting. The bright, hopeful colors were an antidote to the ugliness unfolding online. A week after the story broke, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, but with a local area code. Against my better judgment, I answered, Ilara? The voice was raspy, thick with tears or drink or both. It was Amelia. The sound of her voice sent a jolt through me. I hadn't spoken to her since my birthday. Amelia, a ragged sob echoed down the line. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? My life is over. It's completely over. The self-pity was so quintessentially Amelia that any sympathy I might have felt evaporated. This isn't about what I wanted, Amelia. This is about what you did. You ruined me. She shrieked, the veneer of control shattering completely. You and that Belgian bitch. You plotted this? You wanted to take everything from me. I didn't take anything from you, I said, my voice cold and flat. You never had it to begin with. It was all Isabelle's. You were just the thief who got caught. There was a silence on the other end, broken only by her harsh breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was a broken whisper. "They're suing me for millions. I'm going to lose everything. The house, the car, everything. Mom and Dad, they can't even look at me." I felt a pang, not for her, but for the devastating reality of it all. This was the consequence. This was the price of her vanity. "You should have taken the deal, Amelia. You should have confessed. And let you win?" She spat, a flicker of her old fire returning. "I'd rather burn it all down." "Well," I said quietly, "you got your wish." I heard the click as she hung up. The call had been a vacuum of her own despair, a last pathetic attempt to make me the villain in her story. But the narrative was no longer hers to control. The unraveling was complete. Amelia was a pariah. My parents were social exiles. The family I had known was gone, dismantled by the very lies that had once held it together. That night, I sat in my completed studio, the mural for the library finished and leaning against the wall. It was a vibrant scene of children reading under a great sprawling tree whose branches were made of books. It was full of light and hope. It was my work, my truth. Ben came in and stood behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "It's done," I said, leaning back into him. The public storm would continue to rage for a while. The legal battles would drag on for months, maybe years. But the internal war, the one that had been fought in the quiet corners of my heart for 3 decades, was over. The victory was not sweet. It was solemn, earned at a terrible cost. But as I looked at my painting, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer standing in anyone's shadow. The light I was in was my own. The unraveling of Amelia's life was not my destruction. It was my liberation. And for the first time, the path ahead, though strewn with the wreckage of the past, felt entirely my own. The legal proceedings became a slow, grinding affair, a distant tremor after the earthquake. Amelia, guided by a legal team that was clearly prioritizing damage control over a winnable defense, eventually settled. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown. It was a closed-door negotiation that resulted in a strict confidentiality agreement, the details of which I was not privy to. Isabel, pragmatic and weary of the fight, accepted the terms. The public apology was issued, a stark, lawyer-vetted statement posted to the skeletal remains of Amelia's social media accounts. It was a hollow victory, but a victory nonetheless. The truth was officially recorded. Amelia vanished. She sold her trendy apartment and her luxury car and moved to another state, to a city where no one knew her name or her story. My parents, their social standing irreparably tarnished, sold the house I grew up in, the stage for our lifelong drama, and retired to a quiet, anonymous condo in a neighboring town. The threads that had bound our family together had been severed, not by my hand, but by the weight of a truth they could no longer suppress. The silence from them was absolute. It was a mourning period for a relationship that had, in many ways, never truly existed. I grieved not for what was, but for what could never be. The hope for their understanding, for a reconciliation built on mutual respect, was finally, quietly laid to rest. Ben was my anchor through the quiet sadness. His presence a constant reminder that family is not always defined by blood, but by choice. Months passed. The media cycle, ever hungry for new scandals, moved on. The name Amelia Evans became a footnote, a cautionary tale whispered in design circles. My life, once defined by its proximity to hers, began to truly become my own. The library mural was installed to a small, heartfelt ceremony. The children's faces, lit with wonder as they pointed to the book tree, were a better reward than any headline. The success led to other commissions, a mural for a children's hospital wing, a series of illustrations for a local publisher. My work, my own work, was finding its place in the world. It was not flashy or trendy. It was honest. And it was enough. One afternoon, as I was packing up my studio after a long day, an email arrived. The sender's name made me pause. Isabelle Laurent. Dear Alara, I hope this message finds you well. I am finally in New York for a design conference and would be delighted if you had time for a coffee. I feel we have shared a battlefield, but never truly met as allies. Best, Isabel. My heart beat a little faster. We had spoken only through lawyers and that one pivotal video call. The idea of meeting her in person was both thrilling and terrifying. We met in a quiet cafe near the conference center. She was exactly as she had appeared on screen, elegant, intelligent, with a warm, assessing gaze. When she saw me, she smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that reached her eyes. "Ilara," she said, standing to greet me. We did not hug. We shook hands, a firm, respectful grip between colleagues. "Isabel, thank you for asking to meet me." We sat, and for a moment there was a comfortable silence. The usual small talk felt irrelevant. We were connected by something far more profound. "How are you?" she asked, her tone sincere. I considered the question. "Healing," I said honestly. It said quieter now. "In a good way," she nodded in understanding. "For me as well. The legal business is finally concluded. It is a relief to close that chapter." She stirred her coffee. "I wanted to thank you, Ilara. Not just for the evidence, but for your courage. What you did, it cost you dearly." "It cost us both," I replied. "Yes, but you started with nothing to gain and everything to lose. I, at least, was fighting for my livelihood." She looked at me, her head tilted. "Your work, the library mural. I saw pictures online. It is beautiful, full of light." A flush of pride warmed my cheeks. Coming from her, the compliment meant everything. "Thank you." "I am curating a collaborative exhibition in Brussels next year," she said casually, as if mentioning the weather. "The theme is the integrity of space. It will feature artists and designers who explore honest, soulful creation. I would be honored if you would consider contributing a piece." I stared at her, speechless. "An international exhibition. Alongside Isabelle Laurent, I don't know what to say," I stammered. "Say you will think about it," she said with a gentle smile. "Your voice deserves to be heard, Ilara. On its own merit." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of validation, of a dream I had never dared to articulate coming true in the most unexpected way. This was not an opportunity born from pity or guilt. It was an offer from one artist to another. "I would be honored," I managed to say. We talked for an hour, not about the past, but about the future, about art, about design, about the places where light falls in a room and how it can change a mood. It was the easiest conversation I'd had in years. Walking home through the bustling city streets, I felt a sense of wholeness I had never known. The pieces of my life lay around me, not as a wreckage, but as a new mosaic. The shards of my broken family, the sharp edges of the scandal, the quiet strength I had found in myself, the vibrant colors of my own creativity. They were all part of the picture now. They were not beautiful despite their fractures. They were beautiful because of them. I arrived home as the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. Ben was in the kitchen cooking dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the house, a simple, profound scent of love and normalcy. He looked up as I came in. "How did it go?" I walked over to him, wrapped my arms around his waist, and rested my head against his back. I didn't need to say anything. He felt the change in me, the quiet peace. "It went well," I said softly. He turned around and held me, and we stood there in the warm, fragrant kitchen, in the home we had built together. It was not a palace of illusions. It was a real home, with its own history, its own scars, and its own unwavering truth. The story that began with a cruel taunt at a birthday party had ended not with a dramatic victory, but with a quiet cup of coffee and a future full of promise. Amelia's words, "You'll always be second best," no longer had any power over me. They were just words, spoken by a ghost from a life I had left behind. I was not second best. I was not first best. I was simply Ilara. And for the first time, that was more than enough.